Good morning, everybody. Hope you all had a great weekend. Welcome to another week's edition of Morning Cup of Hockey presented by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. So use our code DAILY365. It's great to be back with everybody after what felt like a really long weekend. Haven't done a show since Thursday. We got a lot of action to talk about going into this week. We will have Russ Joy, who covers the Philadelphia Flyers, joining us right off the hop. I believe he's actually here waiting, so I don't want to waste too much time. Let me kick it over to Colby first for any original thoughts before we bring Russ into the show. Anything happened to you over the weekend?
Nope. This is another hockey-filled weekend. Seems like, doing a little extra coaching right now has me pretty dialed into the game of hockey. Now it's not just the NHL games that I've got up on the screens on a weekend. It's a Titans game if I'm, traveling or if I'm not traveling. Luckily the team continues to play well. Gave them 2 days. They got 2 days off again for the second week in a row because, look, you're on a 6-game heater. You got to kind of stick with what's going right. Yeah, I mean, look, I definitely was entertained this weekend from some of the games. I feel like, teams are starting to settle into who they are. Just settle into who they are a little bit, not a lot. And this is why when we were talking power rankings last night, I said, why don't we give them 15 games before we really start making any declarations? And
because you don't like overreactions, but I do.
It was nice to see a little original 6 matchup on I think Saturday night with Leafs and Rangers. I know we're going to get to that. But I did want to have Russ on today. Some people are probably like, well, why are you guys going to give a lot of attention to the Philadelphia Flyers who have lost 4 games in a row? Look, Broad Street's, 30 minutes down 95 from me. It's not far from you being up in New York. I think the Flyers are they're not an original 6, but they're kind of that next tier of franchise. And I think the league is better when the Flyers are interesting. And unfortunately, not off to the greatest start. But I think that there are some smaller things potentially going on in Philly that I think maybe the casual NHL fan, or even not the casual NHL fan, if you're a fan of the New York Rangers and you're all in with the Rangers, you're not paying super close attention necessarily to what's going on with the Flyers. They're 1-4. They haven't been good for a while. So I wanted to have Russ on today, who is part of a team that does Snow the goalie. They've been around for a while. They're very, very trusted in Philadelphia, even somewhat controversial at times, which I like and I appreciate. Russ also does stuff with Crossing Broad, which is kind of de facto become the go-to for media for people. Philly sports fans, I don't know, he would know the demographic better, but I think it's probably for the under 40 crowd. I think Crossing Broad is kind of the king of Philadelphia. So Russ writes for them. He does stuff for them. He's got his own stuff on Joy Media. And then he also does, I see him talking about the Eagles. I see him talking about the Phillies and also WWF and wrestling. So he's a well-versed guy. So I wanted to have him on today. I used to go on his show a lot when I was working here in Philadelphia, and we don't always agree, but he always has an interesting opinion, and he's not afraid to call it like it is. He's always been that way. So let's bring him onto the show. And I know we're gonna talking to him is sponsored, Johnny. So I'll let you get to it, but we'll kind of get into the Flyers.
So before we bring Russ on, I just want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Proraso, which is the most complete choice for shaving and beard care, made in Italy since 1948. Proraso has been a staple of Italian culture and barbershops globally for 4 generations. So get 15% off at Proraso-USA.com with our promo code Hockey15 in all caps, Hockey15. Let's bring on Russ Joy to the show, and I'll kick it off just because I'm rambling here. But 4 straight losses. First of all, great to see you, and thanks for coming on this morning. 4 straight losses for the Flyers. It seems like the special teams are clicking pretty well, but the goaltending appears to be the issue. So what's the most glaring issue right now for the Philadelphia Flyers? And I'm not sure what that noise is in the background, but if we can figure that out, let's get that out of here. What is that?
Is that me?
Russ, can you hear? That's Russ. That had to be him. Colby,
Can
you there?
I am here.
I got you.
Yeah.
That was Russ. I don't know what the hell that was, but we might have to redo that, Vic. So Vic, I guess we'll keep us posted on what's going on with Russ because I don't know what the hell was going on there. That was a first for me, and I'm not going to brush that off. Colby, I guess you want to go into the goaltending issues before we bring Russ back on, and then we'll kind of ask him his opinion.
Well, I think what caught my eye, and one of the reasons I thought it was a good time to have Russ come onto the show was because I noticed something the other night. A tweet caught my eye from Russ, and then I didn't watch a ton of the Flyers game because it was going up against Leafs Rangers, which to me was just a better game. But Sean Couturier was, slated on his 800th NHL game to play on the fourth line wing. Couturier has been a center his whole career. He really hasn't played much wing since the days of Claude Giroux earlier in their careers. And I saw Russ tweeting about it, and then I thought it was weird, right? You just generally don't see that. The guy's in a big milestone game. Normally in a milestone game, you get the guy out for starting lineups. Like it's just, certain things that you just don't see. Is
800 though? Like is 800 really talked about milestone?
100% as a coach. I said, I'm not saying you got to give the guy 30 minutes a night because it's 800th game. That I'm not no charity there, but most coaches will start a guy. Right? We'll get them out there in the starting lineup if there's an 800th game, if, they just had the birth of a child. Like there's all sorts of different little idiosyncrasies and things that are going on where maybe a guy who doesn't usually start will start a hockey game based on that type of thing. So I see that he is on the fourth line. Okay, listen, and this is what I wanted to talk to Russ about. Maybe that's the level Sean Couturier is playing at right now. But he then has Johnny like the second or third most ice time on the team. Like he played like almost 16 minutes that night, and only 2 or 3 forwards maybe played more than him in that game. So I just was confused about like what the point, like what's happening in Philadelphia is Torts playing mind games with Couturier, or is that saga not over from last year? I mean, look, I thought that whole thing and sitting him and like I was I was totally against that. I really was. So I think we got Russ back. So let's bring him back in. Russ,
how about now? We okay? We good now?
Now we hear
there you go. Yeah.
I tried. Guys, it's kind of emblematic of the Flyers season so far, right? Like you think that one thing's going to happen, and then it absolutely blows up in your face, and you have to pivot, and that's what the Flyers have not exactly been good at this season. But thanks for the patience.
It's all good. I was just getting into how your tweet kind of tipped me off to the fact that Sean Couturier was listed to play on the fourth line at wing, something we haven't seen him do in a very long time. And then what was weird is like I didn't watch much of that game, Russ. As I said, I don't know if you heard, I was a little more focused on Rangers Toronto because it's just a more entertaining game for me, right? And so I looked the next morning because I assumed we were going to see Couturier at like 7 or 8 minutes, and he still played 16 minutes that night at 24 shifts. He takes short shifts. That's one thing he's always been a responsible player about. But are we at a point 5 games into a season where there's a message being sent to the captain? Like, is this saga going to now drown into this season? Because I knew you were the guy to talk to about this.
John Tortorella being petty, never. It is continuing. And it's kind of wild because I think in order to kind of set the stage for like what exactly we saw the other night, you kind of have to go back to last year a little bit. And last year, Tortorella went into the season saying, I'm not going to name a captain. There will be no captain. That's it. That's the end of the story. And then the Flyers got off to a much stronger start than anticipated. They got sensational goaltending. Redacted, a.k.a. Carter Hart, and Sam Ersson had such a great start to the season that it covered up a lot of issues that the Flyers had. So the first half, they looked like a legitimate, potential playoff contender. Second half of the season, somewhere along the line, Tortorella said, no, we're going to name a captain. Now, The details are fuzzy because some in the organization say that Danny Briere and Keith Jones have been kind of beating down towards his door, that you need to name a captain. Like, if this team is actually going to be in playoff contention, you have to have a captain. And then there are some that say that Tortorella just out of the blue one day went to Jonesy and Briere and said, no, we need a captain. I'm naming him today. Okay, fine. They name Sean Couturier captain, and not long after, Torts benches him. And then it kind of felt like there was this message being sent down the stretch during the second half of the season, but especially like the last 20 games or so, where he has Couturier in and out of the lineup. It clearly creates a chasm in the locker room. Like, it clearly creates a chasm between this head coach and the team. And what you saw is what you would expect. The team imploded. It didn't galvanize the team against the coach. It sent them on a slippery slope that they were never able to recover from. So you fast forward to this year. Couturier came on our show and said, clean slate, blank slate, we're going to try this thing again. But we asked him about it, and you can tell that Couturier is still hurt or pissed at Tortorella, at what happened. Because he's been a model citizen. Like, there is not a single human being in the years that I've covered the team that has had a negative thing to say about Sean Couturier. There's not a guy in the locker room. There's not anybody in the organization. There's no one from league circles who's had anything bad to say. So he's a consummate professional on and off the ice. And yet, he gets put into the doghouse last year. So then you turn the page to this season, and Couturier doesn't look good. There's no way to cover up. There's no way to, like, spin it. Couturier has not looked anywhere near Selke Couturier. He hasn't even looked like a 1C. But Tortorella decided to start him on the fourth line, playing left wing, not just the Flyers' home opener, but in his 800th career game. Now, some people say that I was getting bent out of shape because it's a participation trophy thing. I view it as, what exactly has a guy done to piss off a coach so much? Or what has a guy done, in the case of Sean Couturier, that the coach decides, all right, maybe you're not going to be 1C. Maybe we're going to play you a 2C or 3C today. But to put him on the fourth line left wing in his 800th game, that's a message. That's not just doing what's best for business. That's the tweet, the long form version of the tweet.
And then still, Russ, because again, I was in and out of the game, it seemed like his ice time was there, which is even more strange to me, because it's like, okay, put him on the fourth line and then play him 8, 9, 11 minutes like the other fourth liners, but they didn't do that. He played 16 minutes. He had more shifts than any forward. Now, granted, he takes short shifts, but he did. If you look at his actual shift count, 24 shifts, you don't see a fourth liner getting 24 shifts. That's where I'm like, why does it always seem with him to be a little bit of a mind game? I can echo everything you just said. Knowing him personally, skating with him, being around him for many years here in Philadelphia, you know, he's not a guy you go and pick a fight with, because the teammates, like, you're right. It's not one of those situations where, you know, you galvanize the group. And while I've actually liked a lot of what Torts has done in Philadelphia. I have. But when he did that last year and he sat him, I thought, you know, I totally disagreed with that. I totally disagreed with that. And, you know, sometimes I feel like Torts might be willing to, you know, do something in spite, or bite off his nose to spite his face. You know, like he seems like he's willing to die on those hills.
But in fairness, like, he's been empowered to do so. It, like, just comes back to an organizational perspective, right? Like, if your head coach is acting out of line, who's supposed to hold you accountable? It has to be the GM. It has to be the president of hockey ops. To this point, they've all been in lockstep. There's been no public repudiation of what Tortorella did last year. The only time that there really was a moment where Torts had to come out and actually apologize for anything, it was when he kind of gave a non-answer on Felix Sandstrom having a bad game. And Sandstrom's a youngish guy, not somebody that they view as a prospect that's going to matter to them, not a guy that's really in the long-term plans, right? Or at least at that point wasn't in the long-term plans. And then he kind of came out afterwards, and this is kind of around the time of the Couturier thing, and he said the next day that, like, he probably regretted saying what he said or how he said it.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I think that there was probably some internal pressure there that, like, dude, like, it's one thing to go after a vet. It's another thing to go, like, what exactly are we doing here? Mm-hmm. The murmurs, the rumblings that are out there is that this locker room is not thrilled that Torts was brought back.
Really?
And I'm not saying they've given up on the coach. They haven't. Like they're going to go out. It's a new season. You know, you want to try to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, I guess. But like this isn't going to go well. Okay, like there's not last year's Carter Hart walking through the door. Ivan Fedotov as the backup has been a colossal downgrade, right? As he's still trying to adjust. Their next best option is a young Belarusian goalie, Alexis Kolosov, who didn't want to report to the team in the summer, eventually came over, and is kind of like biding his time in Lehigh Valley, hoping that Fedotov falls off and he gets a look. But even then, they're not going to be able to benefit from that elite goaltending they had at the start of last season.
Yeah.
So it's going to be bad. The record's not going to be good. And then you have to wonder, at what point does Torts' message start to fall on deaf ears, assuming it hasn't already?
Well, with that too, I saw that the home crowd, I mean, in their home opener, they get shut out 3-0 to Vancouver, but the crowd's booing the Flyers already in game one. Like game one of the season, you're getting booed on home ice.
Well, yeah.
I mean, Philly fans, listen,
Philly.
we know how Philly fans can be. But again, like
that's normal. I'm unfazed
But-
by
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I'd be more worried if Philly didn't boo
but
a
it-
3-0
but
shutout.
I think the point I want to make though is that like you look at this roster, and I still think 9 out of 10 people are saying that's not a playoff team. But
Mhm.
with
Of
the
course,
way
10 out
that
of
with the
10.
way that last year went, I feel like that's now the expectation in Philly when maybe they're not ready yet, and now you have this whole weird culture and vibe going on. I know that Keith Jones and Danny Briere have been trying to change that, but they're saying about John Tortorella and some of the older core guys like a Couturier being there, who's been there for north of 10 years now. He's probably in year 14, 15 already, right? Couturier, he's been there for that
He's been
long.
here forever.
Since he was Scotty
18.
Lawton's been there a long time, and he's a friend of the show, and he's always come up in trade talks every year, it seems. But what is this culture right now in Philly? I feel like no one really knows.
It's not just what is the culture, it's how much does the culture really matter, right? So, like, the Flyers last year did this weird kind of dance where they had the opportunity to move. Like, Scott Laughton's a good guy. People like Scott Laughton. And he's a good player, and he can serve a role, and he's actually better served on a cup contending team to play bottom 6 minutes.
100%.
But be a great leader on a team. He doesn't have a place here. He just doesn't. And they've had multiple opportunities now to move him for high picks, and they haven't done it. And Briere last year at the trade deadline said, we're not going to take market value for him. It has to be well above market value. And then you start to kind of go like, all right, conceptually, I guess I get it. But like if you are in a rebuild, which is what they said last year, there's no reason to keep him around. There's probably a case to be made for looking at trading Travis Konechny last season or in the offseason before giving him a massive contract. They've done a lot of half measures, which puts you into hockey purgatory. Like the big thing last year was, I said, all right, new GM, new president. You get a 3 to 5 year runway as a GM, right? If you're well enough liked and the ownership is comfortable with you, you get a 3 to 5 year runway. And if you say in year one we're going to be a rebuild, well then tear it down. Like tear down most of it, not all the way to the studs. You don't have to go all the way down, but tear it down enough that you're going to guarantee yourself a top 5 pick. Like that's the kind of thing you have to do, especially at the start. Well, now you're in year 2, and to your point, people saw what looked like a playoff contending team. Were they really a good playoff contending team last year? Absolutely not. Did people maybe sell themselves on the idea? Sure. Did this front office maybe sell itself on it? Yes. Did the coach sell himself on it and try to galvanize that locker room against him to make that push? Yes. But it's like you fired too many of the shots on a useless season. Like last year wasn't the year to fire that galvanizing shot. That's what you do when you're trying to get over the hump, when you're trying to motivate a locker room to take that next step. Not in year one of a rebuild. Laughton, good guy. They moved Walker at the deadline. That created a cascading negative impact on the entire defensive core. And then Nick Seeler got hurt. Like, there were some other things that played into it. But I don't know what the culture is. And more importantly, I don't know if the culture matters. Because how many of these guys are actually going to be part of this thing when you look to flip the switch in 2 to 3 years and become what you consider to be a cup contender? And I would argue that it's not a lot of these guys.
Well, they have guys that are signed pretty long. I mean,
well, that was
long term.
It's funny, Russ. I have their cap. I have their cap chart up right here, and you've got RFAs. You've got Noah Cates, who you're certainly not blaming anything on. Like Noah Cates is an honest player at $2 million. Like he's a good honest player, right? Morgan Frost Curious to hear where you stand on Morgan Frost, because it's been a long journey for him. And when I do turn the Flyers on, and I try to, he looks like an NHL player to me. Like, he doesn't look, and I say this about, Johnny and I go at each other on this anymore. You can no longer look at Morgan Frost as a first-round pick. He's Morgan Frost, the hockey player. This is who Morgan Frost is. I tell Johnny this about Capo Caco all the time. Stop.
Not like I disagree.
No, I know, but I'm just saying you can't be caught up when you're talking about trading Capo Caco because he was a second overall pick. When a guy has a few hundred games under their belt, that's who they are, right? We're done with their draft status. Tyson Forrester, RFA, you're obviously going to bring him back. Cam York, $1.6 million, RFA. So there isn't a lot of roster flexibility moving into next year. And then on goal, like, you know, that's a big question. Like, I mean, because I think Sam Erson was, you know, in a good role as a 1B, as the 40% guy. Now he's the 60% guy. And you've got Fedotov, who I watch him. I can't understand how a guy that big has that many holes. I don't know, but I'm not a goalie guy. So I don't even know what the question is, Russ. It's more just, you know, going through this and wondering where are they going? Like, where are they going?
And I don't know. Fix it in season.
Well, I don't know how you can fix it in season. That's the problem.
Yeah, they can't.
Like, again, so this is like one of those weird things where it's like you have a lot of guys who are good leaders, who are viewed in a positive light, but like probably don't belong. Like, again, I like Travis Konechny. I think Travis Konechny is a good player. I think on a good team, Travis Konechny is a 30-plus goal scorer. Everybody's happy. I don't understand how you give him the term and the AAV that the Flyers gave him this offseason, especially knowing his age and his size. He's not much bigger than me. Now, I have more fat. He has considerably more muscle. But I know at my age, I think I'm like 2 years older than him, I know how I feel when I wake up in the morning. And I'm not taking NHL hits, right? To me, that's a bad allocation of funds. That's a thing where you try to create a bidding war in the offseason, and you try to get another team to bite and let another team give him that contract. The big thing that I always come back to is just because another team is willing to give a player a certain contract doesn't mean you have to. And just because you could make the argument that, like, oh, well, if Travis Konechny had gotten to the open market, he would have gotten similar terms. That doesn't mean you have to be the team to give it to him.
Beauty's
right?
in the eye of the beholder, right?
And so it's like, all right, what exactly is Travis Konechny's ceiling? Like, let's just go comparatively. What is his ceiling? 30, 35 goal scorer. Okay. They have now tinkered with moving Matvei Michkov from right wing to left wing so that he can play on the same line as Konechny. But what do people view Matvei Michkov's upside as? Maybe 20, 25 goal scorer as a rookie. That seems to be the consensus. That's what a lot of the sports books, including Bet365, had, you know, Konechny around, or had a Michkov around. So if we're saying that, like, in 2 to 3 years when this thing's ready to flip, Matvei Michkov is going to be a 30-goal scorer on an ELC or on his first actual contract, why are you paying all this money to Travis Konechny to do the same thing? That, to me, doesn't make sense. Like, that's just cognitively dissonant. Like, let's just make sense of that part. And Konechny, Lawton, they still make your team good enough that they're probably not going to be a bottom 3 team, which hurts your lottery odds.
Yeah.
And I know that nobody likes the idea of, like, oh, well, you have to lose. And you can't convince hockey players to lose. Sure, you can't convince NBA players to lose. But yet there's a way that if you don't put enough talent on the court, that, like, NBA teams find their way to the bottom. The Sixers did it for years. And it's hard to compare the two and, like, the impact of a first-round pick and both. Like, I get it. It's totally different. But, like, the Flyers have done a lot of half measures, and I still don't think they know what they want to do. Morgan Frost, good example, Colby. Like, Morgan Frost, good player. Solid vision. Can be a good playmaker. Probably a decent enough center to get something good out of Matvei Michkov. Might actually be their best choice at center to get something out of Matvei Michkov and not make his rookie year a wasted season. But is he a top 6 guy on any team in this league?
No,
maybe some.
Not on every team.
But not on a lot of teams, certainly not on good contending teams. Mm-hmm. So what's the upside there, right? Like, that feels like you're kind of biding your time. And Fedotov is like 6'7", probably 6'10" on skates. There was a screenshot that people were putting around of, like, him with traffic in front of him. You know, like, goalies like to kind of get low and look around. Well, Fedotov is like a giraffe on skates. He's a big Russian giraffe, right? And he's like, I'm looking over the top. And so he like creates holes for himself because he's getting narrow and getting tall to look over the traffic instead of getting low. And he creates all these weird holes for himself. The thing is, he had success at the national level with the Russian national team. And he had success in the KHL before he got sent off to do military service. I still think there's a good goalie in there. I just don't know how they unlock it. And I don't know if they can. And I don't know if the NHL is the best place for him to kind of recalibrate and learn the game. Unless the goal is, all right, Fedotov's going to go out, he's going to find himself, and you're going to lose games.
Yeah.
And maybe that's kind of like the shadow tank. And maybe that's what they'll end up doing, is they'll keep him there to be the learning experience guy. And you just won't win a lot of games with him in net.
He's leaky, no doubt. And Flyers goaltending, I mean, it's the oldest story in the book. They finally found a guy, and we all know about that situation. Last question I have for you before we let you go here, Russ. Jetlachenko, what is the plan for him, and what does your gut tell you? I mean, is this a guy who we expect to see in the National League all year, or is he probably better suited to be playing big minutes elsewhere? And what a good example, if there ever was one, of a guy who could benefit from either a waiver, a first-round pick waiver, so he could play in the American League, or if the CHL NCAA thing had already happened, which is going to happen, he'd sure look good at somewhere in the whether it's Denver, whether if he wants to stay out in the West, or if he wants to be in the East at a BC or a BU or any of the big time programs out East. Because again, it's hard for an 18-year-old. Like, it just, the development path, when you skip multiple levels, it's hard for a teenager. So what can we expect to see unfold with him over the next, I guess, probably 10 days?
Well, I mentioned before that there's this weird kind of power dynamic between the coach and the GM and the president, right? In no uncertain terms, the front office didn't want Jetlachenko to be on the opening night roster because they don't view this as good for his development as a pro hockey player when they look at 3 to 5 years down the line. Briere said as much on our show, said as much after we got done recording. Like, he's more concerned about what Jetlachenko looks like at age 23 than age 18. And is this the best place for him to do it? Here's the problem. Flyers' center depth is garbage. It's legitimately bad. When we talked about Couturier not looking like a 1C, we talked about Morgan Frost not being a top 6 forward or a top 6, a top 2 center on any or many other teams. They don't really have any options, right? Scott Lawton, nice guy, not a top line center. So they've almost been forced into having to listen to Tortorella. The front office has. Like, Tortorella really wanted to see what he was going to look like at this level. Keith Jones did say, he compared Jetlachenko physically to Rod Brindamore on our show about like that being a young guy, being strong, looking like a mature player, doing everything the right way, finishing drills the right way. But like that's a hell of a lofty comparison, right?
Yeah.
Lachenko will probably get that 9-game look, and then I think ultimately the front office is going to outrule the coach, as they should.
Well, the numbers prove it too, right?
The thing is, like, I guess if you're trying to evaluate, like, what is Jetlachenko and, like, what should the expectations be, it's not a numbers thing. He's, like, rare example of, like, you can't look at the numbers. What does he look like when he plays with Michkov? When you saw it in the preseason, they look dynamic together. Lachenko can make incredibly quick decisions at, like, 120 miles an hour.
He can skate.
He's incredibly fast.
Yeah.
And you start to kind of, like, salivate thinking about, all right, what could a Tippett, Lachenko, Michkov line look like? Yeah, you have 2 burners, and then you have this like ridiculously great vision and potential sniper in the making in Michkov.
That would be a big time line in the National League in a couple of years.
Yeah, but not now.
But not now. And so, in a way, like if Lachenko goes down, again, you're left with this like center depth that's pretty much non-existent. You're left with a backup goalie situation that is far from ideal. And what it does end up adding up to is probably a bottom 5 team, which people like me say, hey, that's actually fine. The big thing is you have to make sure that you keep the fans. You have to make sure that these fans who have now been re-energized by last year, and more importantly have been re-energized around adding Michkov to the mix, that they stay. And there is a way, if they're responsible about it, there's a way to still market around Michkov, and he's still the most highly touted prospect they've had in a decade.
Yeah.
You just have to make sure that you keep the attention of people and you keep their interest. Again, like comparison here, the Sixers were bad for a long time. But once you added a Joel Embiid to the mix, they were still a bad team initially. But that one guy was enough to get people to come out and like fill the arena halfway, 75%.
They were going up.
You could do the same thing here with Michkov. There are good parts here, but they are going to have to make a calculated decision at some point.
Yeah.
Are we going to be that bottom team, or are we going to try to sell ourselves again on this idea of making a run to hockey purgatory, where we either make the playoffs by a little bit or we miss it by a little bit?
Yeah. Well, look, I'll just tell you this much. I personally am rooting for I want Danny and Jonesy to figure this out and get this team back to a place where people in the city are proud of this team, because it is more fun to live here when sports teams are good. There's absolutely no doubt about that right now, although I do enjoy your drubbings of Nick Sirianni every week. We could save that for a different episode. But look, we'll keep an eye on this, Russ. We'll visit with you again. If you don't listen to Snow the Goalie, if you want to know what's going on in Flyers land, I think Snow the Goalie is the place to go. These guys are well connected. They're doing shows live at games. You're in and out of the press row show, right? It's not an every night, or are you there every night?
It's an every home game thing. We're up in the balcony level. We are actually set up by the organist this year. They gave us actual lights. We don't look like as much of a ragtag operation as we did last year.
That's pretty cool. I bet not a lot of teams are doing that.
No.
Yeah, giving a live podcast audience
I don't know any team that does that besides Philly.
They are the Flyers. They really might be the only one that are working in partnership to allow something like that to happen. So that's cool that they're doing that.
Yeah, they're kind of at the cutting edge of some of the stuff, the way that they're presenting. And the video team this year has been fantastic. They're just, I think that they've made a lot of changes behind the scenes, and they're starting to kind of bear fruit. And so even last year when the team was kind of up and down, it all looked nice. Now this year, you look to keep building on it. But we'll see how the team shakes out, guys. We can make a prediction right now, and I guarantee that a month from now it's going to look entirely different, and by the time we get to January, it's going to look like something entirely different as well. So
but we are rooting for them. We do like the Flyers on this show. Last year I was against them just because I didn't think they were actually a playoff team, and I ended up being right. So I'll snap to myself for that. But we're both rooting for Philly. I speak for Colby on that for sure. And Russ, we really want to thank you today for hopping on. We appreciate it. We'll probably get you on throughout the year if that's something that you're okay with.
Absolutely.
Just no crazy noise when you hop on next time.
No, you know what? I'll make sure that the audio setup is set up the way that it usually is. Like I'm going out. This is my laptop now. I abandoned the desktop. I abandoned the nice mic that didn't work. I'll have it up and ready for the next time.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so let's move around the league. Unless you have another thought on Philly before we kind of send it over to the Leafs and Rangers Saturday night.
Let's get to that game, because that was big boy hockey, right?
Yeah, and listen, we're going to talk about the Devils here in a few minutes too, but with the Rangers, before that game, I had said, listen, the Rangers right now are 3-0-1. They beat Detroit twice. They beat Pittsburgh on the road, and they lost at home in overtime to Utah. Like, there was no truly impressive game to me, and I know there's no easy game in the National Hockey League, but when you beat Detroit twice and really kind of kick the shit out of them, and you beat a Pittsburgh team that we don't really have high expectations for, I'm not sitting here saying the Rangers are going to win the Stanley Cup, right? Like, you want to see them beat a good team. And Saturday night, despite not looking so hot, I believe, in the early going, I thought Toronto really kind of brought it to them in the first few minutes of that game. Igor Shesterkin is the difference. And that truly is the difference in that game, right? Like, you can't sit back here and say that the Rangers truly dominated or truly outplayed Toronto. But when you have the goalie who is looking to make $12 million a year and he goes out and plays like that, a 34 save performance, I mean, that's the reason why the Rangers win that game. I know, obviously we'll talk about Lafreniere and his 5-game point streak, and he gets the scoring going with a beautiful goal to start that game. Panarin continues his point streak as well, adding an empty netter. But Colby, what did you make of the Rangers and Leafs? Because I know I have a little bit more of that biased opinion, but Igor Shesterkin right now is worth every single penny that he wants. Yeah,
well, look, it's a 2-1 game without the empty netters, but the empty netters count. I'm certainly not discounting it, but look, it had the feel of a game where both teams were like, okay, we're two powerhouses. Puck management was definitely at a higher level than I've seen really from both teams, and Craig Berube has been on the Maple Leafs to get inside, to play inside. Don't settle. Don't end up on the perimeters. And it wasn't a lack of getting to high traffic areas. Like, I don't think Berube is going to look at that and say, we didn't create enough scoring chances or we didn't create enough good danger to make Igor Shesterkin uncomfortable. But that's the difference. And Anthony Stolarz, like, let's give him
He
credit
played great. Yeah, he
as
played
well.
great.
I mean, he lets in 2 goals and he faced a ton of pressure. But I got to tell you, Igor Shesterkin, talk about backing up, and believing in yourself as a hockey player. This guy is backing up his ask. And I think this could have gone one of 2 ways, as we show you a highlight from MSG Network, from Sportsnet, on Igor Shesterkin absolutely robbing John Tavares in front of the net. But you turned down an $88 million contract the night before the season. So pressure's on.
Well,
go ahead, Johnny.
I actually want to ask you a question too, because this happened right after our show on Thursday and we haven't really had a chance to talk about it. If Jake Ottinger's number at 8 by 8.25 came out before Shesterkin denied the $11 million per year, what would you think Igor's number would be? Because if you told me that, I would think Igor would be getting 10.5 after seeing Ottinger's number. But knowing what I know now, I think it's easier said than done.
Well, wait a sec. Let me ask you about that, though.
Yeah.
So you're saying you'd put Ottinger ahead of Swayman?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Ottinger has proven it more in the playoffs than Swayman has.
See, I don't think Ottinger had a great playoff last year when they finally lost.
Ottinger's playoff career, it's been like 3 postseasons now. He basically got them to that game 7 3 years ago against Calgary. Ottinger was lights out in that first round series.
I don't remember that series.
Johnny Gaudreau had that overtime winner in game 7.
Right.
That was, Johnny's huge goal in Calgary, but Ottinger was incredible in that series. And listen, like Vic just made a good point too. Ottinger has been a number 1 goalie for the last 3-4 years, where Swayman split time. But you look at the playoff stats, and I don't have them in front of me, but I talked about it on the Blue Crew pod actually on Friday. When you look at numbers, Ottinger's numbers outside of Vasilevsky and compared to Ullmark, Sorokin, Swayman, Hellebuck, his playoff numbers are the closest that there are to Shesterkin's playoff numbers. And I think Ottinger's maybe played 1 less game in the playoffs.
Here, I have Ottinger's playoff numbers, so I'll read his playoff numbers. Okay, last year, in his career, he's 47 games played in the playoffs.
Yeah,
23 and 22. He's got a 246 and a 916.
It's pretty damn good.
Okay, but hold on. Let me go a little
Igor
back.
Igor has a 928 and a 2.41. Pretty close.
So last year he had a 915 and a 224. The year before in the playoffs, where he went 10 and 9. Okay. So 19 games in the playoffs in 22-23. He had a 306 and an 895. Now the year before, the year before,
this is the Calgary series,
is the year where he was 3-4 record, but he had a 181 and a 954. So
he was lights out.
Let me just say this, and I'll echo New York Marine here. 916 and 928 are very, very different. It might not seem like a huge delta, but that is a big delta. And I don't know, like, I'm looking here at Ottinger's playoff numbers, Johnny, and I'm going to sit here and tell you, I disagree with you. I mean,
but you think Ottinger
246 and a go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because I think Igor Shesterkin is $4 million better than Sorokin, than Ullmark, than Swayman. Ottinger's the one where I'm like, he might not be $4 million better than.
Yeah, see, I don't put Ottinger ahead of those other guys like you do. I think you're talking about a toss-up, because here, let me give you Jeremy Swayman's numbers from last year in the playoffs. Last year in the playoffs, played 12 games. He was 6-6. He had a 215 and a 933.
Yeah, it's insane.
That's substantially better. Now, the year before, he only started one game. Right? And then the year before, he started 5 games. He was a 3-2 with a 2-6 and a 9-11. Here's the reality, though. We live in a what have you done for me lately situation. So unfortunately, you're only really as good as your last playoff. Like when you're doing these contracts. So I don't agree that Ottinger sits ahead of these other guys.
But here's also where I'll make the point about Igor where I lean the other way. It's that I think Ottinger's team, again, this might be like a hypothetical comment, and it's so whatever. It's probably stupid, but you put Igor on Dallas last year, without a doubt, I think they win the Cup. I think Igor's importance to the Rangers is more significant than Ottinger's importance to Dallas, because I think Dallas's team in front of Ottinger is a little bit more sound and a little bit more complete than the Rangers are in front of Igor. So I think that's where maybe the dollar discrepancy would be what it should be with Shesterkin, because he means that much more to the Rangers. If you get what I'm saying.
Let's look at Igor.
But all I was saying was, like, when I first saw the Ottinger 8x8.25, I would have thought Ottinger is getting 9.
See, I wouldn't have. Wouldn't have thought he was getting more than Jeremy Swayman. I wouldn't have. I would have thought maybe he came in slightly under. I really would have. You look at his playoff numbers from the last 2 years for Ottinger, like, they're not bad, but like, they're not great. And none of them are in the same realm as Igor. I mean, I don't know how we ended up
talking about this
early into this debate. And that's totally fine.
We haven't talked Jake Ottinger since he signed.
But also, Jay's asking on our chat, Johnny.
No, I saw that. I don't put Ottinger in front of Hellebuyck.
In front of Hellebuyck?
No, I don't.
But Hellebuyck also signed his contract
last year,
last year,
before last season.
It's hard when you compare guys who sign in different years, because $1 then isn't the same as $1 now, and the salary cap, and it's just inflation, everything. So it's
Jay, Hellebuyck signed before last season. Him and Scheifele both signed the same exact deal, 8x8.5.
Okay, so I don't know, man. I think, here's another interesting thing. And Chris just wrote this in the chat. If Ottinger's making 8.25 in Dallas and Igor is making 12, they're making the same thing after all the state tax, the city tax, and everything that comes out of your checks, then cost of living. You could argue, and it's a pretty damn good argument, at the end of the year, if these two guys live the exact same type of lifestyle, Ottinger's coming home with more money. It's cheaper to live on top of it all in Dallas.
Also, let me say one more thing just about this Ottinger-Hellebuyck thing, because, I know the saying is you make your money in the regular season, you make your name in the playoffs. But, Jay, because Jay's the one who's asking about Ottinger versus Hellebuyck, Ottinger's actually played in more playoff games than Connor Hellebuyck and has better numbers. Hellebuyck has a 18-27 record in 45 games. Ottinger has played 47, I believe was the number. And Hellebuck's stats are 2.85 save percentage, or 2.85 goals against average, and a .910 save percentage in his career. Like, and the last 2 postseasons, Hellebuck's numbers have both been under 900. So, like,
Jeremiah, don't forget property taxes. Property taxes on a $2 million condo or more in New York City versus Dallas are going to be a hell of a lot different. So, look, it was actually, I think it was your guy, Pegnota or Pegnata. I don't know how you say his last name. I know you're friendly with him, but he put a tweet out kind of breaking down the money of an 8.5 or an 8.25 versus 12 in New York City and how that kind of all breaks down. So, look, Igor Shesterkin is betting on himself, and he is driving up the dollar price. I mean, he just is. Like, if I'm Chris Drury, I'm trying to get this done, because with every passing day, the number goes up. You do have to remember they're the only team that can offer 8 years. So I still think there's a chance, and Frank and I disagree on this, and we usually do, is that this guy ends up in Vegas next year in a completely different tax environment, making $11 million in Vegas, in the state of Nevada.
I was the one who said that on our show, that Vegas could be the team.
Look, we've been talking about this since before the season started. Okay. They have no real goaltending plan right now, long term.
Are you giving us a prediction right now that you think Igor will be a Vegas Golden Knight?
I think he's going to end up playing for the Vegas Golden Knights, and I think the number is going to be, maybe it's going to be $12 million a year. I think they'll find a way to make that work out. And again, like, why, if you're Why, if you're Shesterkin, are you signing now? The season is playing on. You're playing very well. You can easily insure yourself for future earnings if you're worried about injury. They do have insurance for that kind of stuff. So I don't know. Like when you look at the breakdown and you look at how much, if money is a big driver, and it should be, this is your lifetime opportunity here. Why stay in New York City and pay all those taxes and live in one of the hardest, most expensive cities to live in the world, when you can go across, and play
and be a contender right away.
Make way more, couple million more dollars a year just because of where you live. So I know Rangers fans are allergic to hearing that, but it's just, that's my prediction.
It makes sense. It makes sense too.
I don't think he ends up in New York. I don't, unless they get that number up to 12, whatever his ask is. If they don't hit that exact number, why wouldn't he become a UFA? Why wouldn't he do it?
So just to wrap up this debate a little bit, you think Shesterkin is worth that much more than the goalies I just mentioned: Ottinger, Hellebuck, Ullmark, Swayman, Sorokin?
Say it again.
You think Shesterkin's worth $4 million more than those goalies: Ottinger, Swayman, Ullmark, Sorokin, and I think there was one that I'm missing. Whatever, you get the point. Swayman.
I think those guys are worth a little bit more than they got. But I think Shesterkin's worth $12 million.
Okay.
I think Jeremy Swayman, I'd have been happy to see Jeremy Swayman at $9 million. I really would have.
Okay.
And I think had he become a UFA, he would have got to that number, maybe even higher.
While we're on goalie talk, I know we were going to go into the Devils next, but let's just transition into the Winnipeg Jets, because they are, without a doubt in my mind, the number one team in the NHL right now. I know points-wise they're not, but they're 5-0. Connor Hellebuck is off to an incredible start with a .952 save percentage and a 1.25 goals against average and a plus 3.8 goals saved above expected. They have 7 guys at a point per game or over right now. 7 different players on their roster who are producing. Mark Scheifele leading the way. Nikolai Ehlers, 2 goals, 5 assists. He's looked incredible so far this season. The Jets power play number 1 in the NHL at 43.8%. This team's scoring goals. They're keeping pucks out. They're doing a little bit of everything. And Colby, I know you want to talk about this. I was DMing with Chef Richard basically all day yesterday because the Winnipeg Jets fans were doing the "Where is Rutger" chant since McGroarty was sent down to the AHL last week before the Jets played the Penguins. Obviously, everyone knows the story that that Rutger wasn't going to sign with Winnipeg. We'll give you that scene right now. Vic's got it teed up.
Carlson. Pedersen for Puljujärvi. That's deflected back down ice. Comrie will slow it down as both teams change in front of him.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everybody can hear, the scene set. Hey, look, the reality is this is the kind of thing that happens when you decide not to sign with a team. I love him. I love Rutger. I root for Rutger. I will support Rutger his whole career, but that's funny. And that's part of it. You make a decision to do something like that, you get what you deserve. You got to be able to realize these types of things are going to happen. And so I have absolutely.
You think he was sent down to avoid that? You think he was sent down to avoid that?
No. I don't think that's even taken into consideration when you're talking about a 19-year-old kid. I think Rutger McGroarty was sent down because playing 12 minutes a night in the National Hockey League in a limited role is not good for the development of a young kid. What you want is all situations. You want to be on the ice the last minute of a game, up a goal, down a goal, killing penalties, power play. And, who's he taking off the power play right now? Who's he taking off the penalty kill right now? How are you going to put him out 6-on-5 when you have all those stars? So this is about, developing a player. And I see the comment in the chat from Chef Richard. He said, Craig Button seems to think so. Are you saying Craig Button thinks he was sent down just so he wouldn't have to deal with that?
Yes. Yeah, that's what Chef Richard was giving me about yesterday.
See, I strongly disagree with Craig. And I think if anything, if you were going to use that type of logic, you'd want to keep him in the lineup for the game against Winnipeg so you can show the Winnipeg fans this kid is one of ours now, and this kid is a good player. And you guys should have signed this guy. Like that's how I would, if you're taking that into consideration, which I don't think you should be, that's how I would look at that situation.
Yeah. And again, like Vic just said too, internally, you want to see how he responds to that. Rucker McGroarty is also one to not shy away from big moments. It seems like from, what we saw in the World Junior last year, he was a big part of that gold medal. But again, like the main point of this little segment here, though, is that the Winnipeg Jets, a team that we talked about last year, who we felt can be a true Stanley Cup contender, and then they kind of folded in the first round. Are you still sold on Connor Hellebuck being the guy that can do it to get them over the hump, even though we just read out his playoff stats over the past 2 years, which again are below a .900 save percentage? But right now, he looks like he's in Vezina form again.
I'm not out on Connor Hellebuck. I don't think this guy has some paralyzed, playoff confidence issues. I think players go through peaks and valleys. I've seen Connor Hellebuck in games that matter at the college level look as cool as, the other side of your pillow. I still have a lot of faith in Hellebuck. I think you go back and you look at, the defensive zone coverage, and now Hellebuck obviously wasn't great, but he didn't, his team got pulled out of their structure in that round against Colorado. His team, gave up a lot more grade A's. They mismanaged the puck. Puck management is something, that I preach on the show, and I preach to our team with the Titans, all of our teams, our juniors, our U18s, our U16s. Like, it's hard to get the puck, right? The game of hockey is fast. Players are so skilled. Gone are the days of the guys who are slow and can't skate and are thumpers out there, right? So when you don't manage the puck well against a team like Colorado, I don't care if Igor Shesterkin, Hellebuck, Patrick Waugh is in goal. You're going to give up grade A chances. You're going to put your goalies under stress, and guys shoot the puck 100 plus miles an hour. So I still am a believer in Connor Hellebuck. And if this team, which
there's no reason not to be a believer.
I will say this, Winnipeg, they do this though. They go in these stretches where they make you think that they're the best team in the National Hockey League. And then they have massive valleys. Their peaks are big. Their valleys are as big. And Chef Richard, chat us up here if you disagree. There have been times where we've seen this Winnipeg team look really dominant early, and then that middle part of the season comes and they don't necessarily nosedive, but instead of the continual climb, they head into the playoffs on the wrong side of a peak and valley, and then it gets carried into the playoffs. So, long ways to go here, Johnny. Let's get to the Devils because we've been kind of dragging on, and Chef Richard said annual collapse in February. He knows it. He rides that way.
Yeah. But let's talk about the New Jersey Devils, because right now they're the first place team technically in the NHL, even though they've played the most games out of everybody. So that's why the points are a little bit inflated. But the Devils are 8 games in, and I look at these games, and again, they lose to Washington on Saturday night in overtime by the score of 6-5. And they've now lost games to the Capitals. They've lost to Toronto. They lost to Carolina, and the teams they have beaten, Buffalo twice, Utah, and Ottawa. So I look at the games, and they beat Washington as well previously. But I look at these games and the 3 teams they've lost to, including Washington, because Washington has looked solid to start the year. I'm not going to sit here and shit on the Capitals, even though I did last year. They looked pretty good here in the beginning. But the Devils, to me, have not had a convincing win yet. And I know that the Devils are the team that everyone was talking about going into the season. They're, going to be one of the Stanley Cup favorites, and they should be. They bring in a new coach. They have a very strong roster. Their decor looks better. Seamus Casey's off to a great start, and we'll get into him a little bit too. The Devils' PK has been excellent, but their goaltending was the biggest thing that was solved over the summer. And Jacob Markstrom right now, who is their number one guy, is at a .902 save percentage and a 2.99 goals against, where Jake Allen has gotten 2 starts and has put up insane numbers at a 0.50 goals against and a .974 save percentage. I mean, insane numbers from Jake Allen. But here's the thing I'm looking at for New Jersey. Right now, it looks like their third line is somewhat carrying them, and they've shifted their lines a little bit. So that third line is Tatar, Haula, and Stefan Nason. But Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt have been a little bit quiet to start this year. Jesper Bratt has 1 goal, 6 assists. Sure, that looks great on paper, but 0 goals at even strength, only 3 even strength points. And Jack Hughes, only 1 goal, 4 assists. Jack Hughes' goal did come at even strength, but these two need to get going a little bit more if the Devils are going to be a legit threat that they want to be. I know that was a lot, but what did you take away from that little Devils rant?
Are you concerned though about Jack Hughes long term, or is he just off to a slow start? I mean,
he's off to a slow start, but he last year he was off to last year he had 20 points in the first 10 games of the season.
Look, maybe he doesn't have as many points this year, but I still think that he's very capable. Look, I think Dougie Hamilton could play better for this team. I'm watching the games, and I don't see a number one defenseman when he's on the ice, and he does need to be their number one guy. I love the pairing of Dylan because it gives him a little more flexibility, Dougie Hamilton, to be involved. I think Dylan is one of those guys that you can lean on and you can rely on to kind of cover up for certain things. There is youth there, with Nemec and Casey. You are fighting not first year for Nemec, but Casey's in his first year. Sheldon Keefe had a quote talking about Seamus Casey, how well he's done, but how difficult their stretch has been. They played a lot of games and not a lot of days. Remember, Seamus Casey played, 40 games last year, at Michigan. And generally speaking, you're playing on Friday and Saturday night. Right now, he's probably played more games in a short period of time than
think about the travel too. They went to Prague.
Than he's ever played. I mean, other than maybe within like a World Junior tournament where they jam a bunch of games in, but you add all these factors, like there is going to be a little bit of up and downs for him. And I did see that, Keefe said, we didn't give him a lot of ice time in that game, but we were getting ready to put him out in overtime right as we scored, which I think
got scored on.
Got scored on. That's right. Washington did go on to win that game after a little bit of a comeback and a push by the Devils. Look, I'm not worried about Jack Hughes. It's too early in the season to worry about a guy as good as him, right? As a guy who's not really taken steps back since after his rookie year, right? His rookie year was kind of and then he's climbing, right? So not concerned about him. You still are going to get some help on the back end when a couple of injured, guys return to the lineup. I don't think Markstrom is like in that elite category of number ones. Like I certainly don't put him there, but
No.
I put him in that next little stretch of guys, guys who can be competent starters. I think Jake Allen, again, if you don't give Jake Allen too much work, I think you have a really, really good tandem there. And maybe that's kind of more how they need to treat it.
Yeah, and I see people commenting in the chat about Nashville. Nashville's a team we'll get into tomorrow. But right now, just last thought on the Devils. I believe their next game is tomorrow with the Frozen Frenzy, which is tomorrow against Tampa. If they beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are off to a pretty hot start themselves, I'll think differently. But right now, until the Devils show me a strong, complete 60-minute effort against a really good team, I'm not sitting here completely threatened by New Jersey yet. Like I don't think they're having this magical season that everyone kind of expected them to have 8 games in. Again, it's still early, but that's my final thought on the Devils. Colby, I know there was something you wanted to bring up about the Sheffield Steelers.
Yeah, we'll talk. We'll get into Champions League stuff tomorrow.
Okay.
There's only one game tonight, and tomorrow we'll take a look at setting up the Frozen Frenzy a little bit. Obviously, we had Butchie on last week to talk about it, but I think we save a couple of these things to get into more tomorrow. We talk about what's going on in Nashville. Give me a little bit of an opportunity tonight to look at a little film, dig in a little bit more on why I think that they're losing. I haven't seen a ton of Nashville and some other international hockey things going on. So let's get to Bet365 here. Let's hear what you got on tap for us tonight, Johnny. See how you're going to win some people some money, and then we'll wrap the show and we'll start thinking a little bit and preparing for tomorrow.
All right, let's get into our bet of the day presented by Bet365. The Montreal Canadiens totally screwed us over on Thursday night. I thought that one was going to be a for sure win with LA playing 3 road games in 4 nights. I really felt strong about the Canadiens. So the record's not looking too hot right now, but tonight we'll get back on track with the first period over 1.5 goals in the opening period tonight between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So my thought process here is that a lot of these games trending around the NHL seem to have high scoring first periods. I used to be a first period under guy, but lately, the way that the season has started, I'm going over. And a lot of that has to do with Toronto's offense right now, which is actually averaging 1.20 goals per game in the first period. And Tampa defensively is allowing 1.25 goals against in the first period of their game. So there's been some action going on in the opening period for both teams, whether it's Tampa's defense or Toronto's offense. I think Toronto comes out hungrier to score after Saturday night being shut down by Igor Shesterkin. It won't be much easier for them tonight against Andrei Vasilevsky, but I think they'll find a way to put the puck in the back of the net early. And then obviously Tampa Bay with Kucherov, Gensel, Braden Point, a lot of the scoring threats that they have up front. They just put up a good amount of goals on the road on Saturday, I believe, against Ottawa. So I think this is a high scoring first period. I like the over and not too much juice on it at -135. So that's what we're riding with tonight. And Colby, any thoughts on that before we kind of wrap it up?
I would say everybody get your rest in tonight. Only one game on the NHL schedule. If you've enjoyed this episode, give us a like on our YouTube page, wherever it is that you're watching or listening. If you are an audio only, get those automatic downloads set. This way you never miss an episode. Look, with my favorite shows, I piece them together throughout the day. 15 minutes in the car here, 15 minutes with the dog walking there. So give us a like, subscribe to the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel. I will be sitting in on DFO Live today with Tyler Yaremchuk. That'll be at noon. Tomorrow we will set up the Frozen Frenzy. We'll talk a little bit Nashville and what else we have seen from trends going on to start this season. I think that's all the time we have today. We appreciate you riding with us, and we will see you at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.